Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, regardless of where you're joining us from around the globe. And thank you for joining us for our recurring ETRAGE webinar series. We host a variety of different topics within the design and manufacturing industry twice a month. And you can find future webinars on our website at etrage.com under the Events tab. Now, a few housekeeping items. First off, everyone is muted. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A icon. And if we're not able to answer your question during today's session, we will follow up with you afterwards. And finally, a recording will be available later on our ETRAGE YouTube channel of this webinar. So today we'll be talking about the ETRAGE new product initiative module, new product introduction module, I should say. And it's going to be myself and my colleague Connor that we're going to be presenting on this. And so Connor is an active sales rep. He's been in the PTC channel for almost a decade now, right? And myself, again, I've been in the PLM and CAD space for a little bit longer than that as well. But ultimately, for both of us, it's a joy is to help customers minimize pain, identify any pain points in terms of using PLM and or CAD in their design processes efficiently and effectively, right? And the NPI module, with ETRAGE, fits right into that as well, right? So Connor is also on the webinar as well, and he'll be joining in, during the Q&A portion for any questions that may pertain to the sales side as well. So quick look at the agenda. So we'll start off with some introductions, right? And some introductory slides about ETRAGE and who we are. And then we'll go into the content of the webinar, which in this case, we'll talk about maybe kind of like set a backdrop, right? For, how NPI can be done, incorrectly, right? And then for many cases where customers currently use, products to do NPI, it's oftentimes free solutions like Excel and or email, right? And so we want to take a look at, what's wrong with that process, right? And then we introduce, against that backdrop, the NPI solution that we have, and then afterwards dive into kind of a value slide, and then some questions and answers. And I'll also mention again, as we're going through this, if you have any questions, by all means, just feel free to drop it into the Q&A portion of the Zoho webinar interface, even before we get to the questions panel at the end. So, but I'll dive into who we are. And so ETRAGE is we're first off a global company, right? With over 20 years of experience helping customers adopt PLM throughout the enterprise, ensuring that we can efficiently address any gaps in infrastructure to ensure that different stakeholders, so engineering, manufacturing, inspection, quality, purchasing, service, etc., all have access to the same PLM data, and so we can fill the gaps in the digital infrastructure. So our goal is to ensure that we enable enterprise-wide PLM adoption, right? And we do that through a variety of through three main buckets, I'll call it. So one being systems, and second being management, and then the three being end users. And so on the system side, we design and develop systems that enable PLM adoption and or sync in the digital thread, right? We also then have, we can help you manage those systems as well. So we can do, maintenance and upgrades, license management, PLM configuration, and the like. And then finally, also then we also manage on the end user side as well. So whether it's training and or upskilling your end users in order to use PLM, appropriately. And underlying all of these buckets are, training and or help desk services that we can apply to any of those different, kind of broad solution headers. So here we have, a few of the companies that we've worked with over the years and are currently working with as well, and many of our products that we support as well, and we currently develop. And so the one that we'll be highlighting today is the NPI module. But again, there are many others, and you could look at our website and or our prior webinars for any other information and any other topic that may be of interest to you that you see on the screen right now. All right, so that being said, we'll dive straight in. And so in this case, I'll start off with kind of the story of NPI done wrong, right? And I guess maybe to kind of underscore the need for why it matters, right? And the story I'll highlight in this case is actually one of the Samsung Galaxy Note 7, right? Of course, I have an image of Samsung batteries on the screen, and you're wondering, well, why is that, right? Well, for those of you that may not be aware, or if you do know, right? So Samsung Galaxy Note 7 was a tablet / smartphone kind of hybrid product that was developed by Samsung sometime I think fall of 2016, right? Officially released mid-August, right? And it had many new things going for it, a lot of different innovations, right, that they'd introduced into the product, right? And it was very warmly received, right? I think the reception, right, was that during the pre-order period in South Korea, it broke records for how many units were pre-ordered within just the first couple of days, right? And so there was a lot of pent-up demand and anticipation of this product, right? And in fact, globally, they had to delay releases due to supply chain shortages. But once the product got into customers' hands, right, it was a whole different story, because what essentially then ended up happening was people noticed that when the phone was being charged, right, it was prone to catching on fire, right, or exploding, or having and essentially getting very, very high temperatures, right? And it was such a big issue that it was considered, the phone itself was considered a hazmat product, right? Meaning you were prohibited from taking it on board many airlines and or bus stations. There are many news stories of users and customers charging and or using the phone, and all of a sudden it catches on fire. That would be an unwelcome sight. Right? And ultimately, at some point, Samsung decided to the core issue, I should say, was because of the battery, right? So the existing battery they had in there had a manufacturing defect that essentially meant that there would be a short circuit, right, at some point, and with short circuit, infinite current, a minimal resistance, that just leads to the battery overheating and then exploding, or catching on fire. And so in this case, they chose to switch battery suppliers to a different company, right, and continue the product launch, but the new battery also suffered from the same issue as the old battery did. And so functionally speaking, to the eyes of the consumer, it was no different. It was still the same product that was still exploding and catching on fire. And so at some point, Samsung announced formally that they were going to recall the product. And this was a month later, right, that they recalled the product, right? And eventually they, for all intents and purposes, bricked the phone. They eliminated the ability to work as a mobile device, and it for now it's in the museum of failed NPI initiatives. Now, I pulled this story out, as a very high level tale to show the impact of when NPI goes wrong, how catastrophic the impact can be. In this particular example here, the estimate was that Samsung lost, about $17 billion globally, and had to take a write-off. And I think their quarterly profit was down by 33% globally as a result of this one product that went wrong. Right? And so again, that just shows the value of how NPI is incredibly huge, incredibly critical to the perception and the health of any organization. Right? When it's done wrong, it can be very, very catastrophic. Right? And so then, I'll dive into the kind of the next point of this, which is the fact that many companies, many customers, right, are doing NPI, right, essentially by using Excel and or email. Right? In many cases, you're having people take whether it's Word and or Excel documents that have maybe your NPI template on there, and you're emailing one person fills it, emails it out to another to a group of people, and then or maybe it's and then another person fills some part of it, emails it back. But eventually, then what you have happen then is there are many issues with that, right? Particularly with email, which is the fact that you could have something as simple as, what if one person hits reply instead of reply all, right? And then other people are missing missing some critical information about that, that they should be seeing on there, right? What if sometimes the email attachment gets stripped out of the email, whether it's again hitting reply versus forward, or even whether it's any firewall and or antivirus or spam blocking software that strips out attachments from the recipient end, for example. Right? So again, yes, Excel is free, email is free, or almost free, or it's included in the cost of doing business currently. Everyone is familiar with it, knows how to use it, right? It's how we've always done it, right? But ultimately, the key point is it's very easy to skip steps, miss any information, right? And you're just more likely to end up with a poor NPI solution, where either you're missing product launch deadlines, or on the back end you launch the product but you're then suffering from customer recalls and or warranty issues and claims at on the back end of it. And so for that reason, right, or I guess for all those reasons I should say, is why we developed the ETRAGE NPI solution. And this is a solution that lives within the ETRAGE viewer, right? And it enables you to initiate and track and manage NPIs within a secure environment from start all the way through to finish. And so I'll pause right here and dive into a live demonstration of the solution, and we can show you how it works. Okay. All right, so this is the NPI module here. But before I actually jump into the NPI module, I'll actually take a step back and kind of like a 10,000-foot view and dive into a couple of the other modules within the ETRAGE viewer. So the first one I'll show over here is going to be the document view module, right? And this is one where our publisher, we can take and publish files from PLM, right, straight into the ETRAGE viewer, and this allows you then to view and access any CAD and or CAD derivative data outside of engineering or outside of using your PLM system, right? And so, for example, in this case here, I'll list out in this particular database, these are all the CAD drawings that are in the ETRAGE viewer, right? And there could also be any CAD derivatives like step files or DXFs or DWGs or anything that you can take from a CAD native and export a third-party version, or you could even have the CAD native version itself living within here. And to view that, it's as simple as you can select on any of these items, you can see a thumbnail, you can see any attributes, you can even download the PDF itself right from in here. And so this allows anyone across the organization that needs access, whether it's quality or manufacturing or supply chain and or purchasing or marketing, to all get access to the same CAD derivative data without having to send emails back and forth. And then we also have, in this case, the change notice module, right? And this allows you to publish ECNs via our publisher from your PLM system into the ETRAGE viewer. So again, everyone across the organization can have instant visibility into all the ECNs that have been resolved or are in process, right? And you can see, in this case, what the ECN is about, the affected object, the resulting object, things like that. So it's within that world that we then added the NPI module, right? And oftentimes that means that when you're dealing with NPI, particularly in engineering organizations, where you could, for example, take a concept, right, from an existing product you have, right, and then use that as a concept for a new model, right? Or if, say, for example, you could, you're releasing a new product, right, but there's a ECN that could affect how that product gets released or how it gets manufactured or the eventual design of that product, right? Well, all of those are items that you can add and track and attach to an existing NPI from within this interface. And so I'll dive into one of these here, and we'll take a look at this a little bit more. So we'll use this NPI project 1, and first thing we'll notice is that at the very top over here there is some general information about the project, the customer who we're working with, the due date, start date, and things like that. Next, I'll jump in over here. I'll show the membership table, right, which shows in this case for the different roles within the organization, right, who was the users assigned to those roles, right, any escalation levels, right, and so again there are 2 escalation levels in this case, and that sends notifications to either of these 2 users if, for example, a task is approaching and or is past the deadline and has not yet been completed. Now, when I mentioned the membership table over here, what I should also point out that everything you see in the ETRAGE viewer, including this NPI module here, is all role-based and access controlled. Right? In order for me to get to this NPI and to see this NPI, if you look at the very top right corner, I'm logged in as this user, right? And so if I was logged in as a separate user that was not listed in this membership table, right, I could not even see this NPI on my screen. If I don't even have login access to the ETRAGE viewer, I can't even see any of this, right? And so again, it's all role-based and access controlled to ensure that only the right people with the right access in the right, or in the designated responsibilities or permission levels get to see and make any changes or progress forward your NPI. Next thing I'll point out over here is that there are sign-off settings as well, and so we can enable users to, and this is optional by the way, I should mention, but you can enable users to sign off on any aspect of the NPI. Right? So if I edit the signers in here, you can specify for any particular role or title, right, who the primary signer would be, who the alternate signer would be. If you want to add a new alternate, it's easy to select new person in here. And you can specify whether the signers will apply to the entire NPI, or to phases, or to tasks, or to phases and to tasks. So say in this case, for example, I'll say this should apply to phases, and I'll save that. All right. I'll collapse this, and next we'll talk about the phases section. And in this case, the default view is it shows all the phases expanded out. If I want, and plus the corresponding tasks underneath them expanded out as well. If we want to go ahead and collapse these, there's a toggle button right over here where we can collapse these to show just, for each particular phase, the tasks within that phase. So then you can also, I can select in another phase and see what tasks are within that. And you'll notice the UI is fully also color-coded as well in many different screens and aspects. And so you can clearly see, for example, in this case, red is, this phase contains tasks, or the phase itself is, overdue, and so it's red, right? Green is, it's not yet past its due date; it's still within range. Right? Yellow would be, it's approaching, the due date. It's maybe within 2 or 3 days of being due, and so it becomes yellow, right? And so it's very easy for you to see right here on the screen. Okay, well, what needs our attention immediately, right? And what do we still have some time on, right? So in this case, I'll dive over here and see in this case, this phase 2 over here, that's what needs our attention, and it looks like the PFMEA is not yet been fully completed, right? And so that's still in work. I can go in here and go into that particular task and see, okay, well, assigned to the task, for example, if it's assigned to anyone, right? What if they have any status updates and or information about the task before, as it's progressed so far. I can select down over here on the history button over here and see all that information, right? And so all of that, any changes to this NPI are all fully tracked in here. So that way there's an audit trail of who did what at what time and what was added or removed. Right? And so say in my example, say in this case, I'm a manufacturing engineer, right? I already completed the PFMEA. I just need to go ahead and upload it in here into the system. And so I'll come in and I will specify, I'll edit files over here, right? And I can select any files on my local computer, right, that I can upload into the system. So take this one. Now again, once I do this, it's right within the ETRAGE viewer. It's securely controlled and access controlled and tracked at this point, right? And so if I change this on my computer, right, it's a different version or variant, right? Now anyone else that logs into the system and has access to this NPI can see the same file without having to ask for an email to be sent or hope the attachments come or the attachments are not stripped out of an email, right? I can also add a document link, right? And that's the beauty of why I mentioned the document view earlier. If I know the part number, I can just type it in immediately. In this case, I don't know what it is, so I'll just use a wildcard, right? It'll list out for me here all the models in the system, right? And in this case, it shows me any CAD assemblies and or drawings and or any other documents as well. And so I can very easily see and then go select, okay, I think this is the document that applies for this particular task. And so I'll go ahead and add that as a link over here. I can also add any subtasks as well, right? And so say, for example, I want to add, if there's a verification subtask that needs to be completed, right? I can specify that, right? So again, if there's some additional tasks you need to add beyond what's completed in the NPI template, we can add that, specifying maybe in this case who it's assigned to, right? So I'll say maybe Chris Brown, and of course you can specify a start date and a due date and other information here. But for sake of time on the webinar, I will go ahead and just add the subtask. Now that shows up in here as an additional subtask. Additionally, we can also add any dependencies as well, and the dependencies here would be dependencies between tasks, right, or subtasks, right? And so, and you can specify, the dependency type, start to finish, or you could, there are many different flavors of how you can add dependency between which specific tasks to ensure that, if you have dependencies between, A needs to get done before B gets done, or vice versa, you could apply those dependencies in here, and those would be controlled and managed within the ETRAGE NPI module. So at this point here, I will go ahead and click on that subtask and complete it, right? So yeah, I'm done with my verification. Progressing this forward is simple as changing the status on here, right? And so if I'm completed with that, I'll say that's complete. Right? Save that. Now I can come back to the parent task itself, right? And okay, I've added my PFMEA control document, and I've added the document it's linked to. All the subtasks are completed, and so now I will go ahead and say this is also completed as well. All right. So now I'll go back over here and I can go to the phase itself. I think that was phase 2, right? And now you'll notice in this case over here, if I come over to, actually I'll step back one quick second here to highlight something real quick. So if I come back to, the same task, I will quickly modify this back to in work. Right? Okay, so task is in work. Now I can come back to the phase itself. And within the phase, you'll notice that I don't have an option to change the status to complete. So again, there's some intelligence built in, right, to ensure that, if a phase can't be marked complete if there are still open tasks inside of it that need to be completed. So if I cancel out of here, the moment I come into, phase and edit this here and say mark that completed, right? Now I can go back to the phase, edit that, and yes, now I do have the complete status or completed status where I can now status that appropriately as well. Save that, and yeah, that's how you can go ahead and status the entire NPI module. Right? The other thing I'll also highlight as well is the sign-off process as well, right? So again, because I specified earlier that there should be a sign-off for phases and tasks, right? There's a sign-off section where, in this case, it prompts. There's going to be a prompt to sign this particular phase. And in this case, it's already been signed by my user on this date, right? And it shows the user that signed it and the date and time it was signed. And so again, it's very easy to kind of and I guess I'll show the signing process. I'll pick another phase over here just to show the signing process. It's as simple as once the phase is completed and the phase is marked completed, you can go ahead and hit the sign option will be available to you, and you can go ahead and hit the sign button and then verify that and sign that as well. Okay. I'll also mention real quick as well. I think I mentioned earlier that the UI is color coded everywhere with tasks that are close to approaching being due or that are already past their due date or are not yet due, right? All of those are tracked by notifications, right? And so and to kind of show that the system has system-generated emails that can be sent to notify users on the event, essentially. So whether some of the easiest ones or the most common ones are typically, if a task has not yet started but the start date has passed, right? You can have the system automatically send an email to whoever is assigned to the task, and or the escalation levels, 1 or 2. You could also say if a task the due date has passed and it's not yet been completed, then you can send an email to to the assignee and or the escalation levels as well. And so all these notification settings here are completely customizable, right? And so again, this is something that you can always change or tweak per customer requirements as well. Okay, so in addition to all of that, the other thing I'll also highlight over here real quick is the fact that if I come back to list of all the NPIs over here, there is, I'll go ahead and add a new NPI just to show you how easy it is. And it's specifying again a name and a description, but then we do that with what we call NPI templates, how to make a new NPI, I should say. And there's 2 default templates. One is the basic template, and then the other is a fast track template. And if I use the basic one and I show details over here, it'll show first off the membership table, right? The initiating user gets added automatically as a manager to this. But I can also go in here and add other users that should be part of the NPI process and what their roles are, right? And so I can go ahead and select users as needed. I can also search to filter and add users that way as well. Right? And over here, you'll notice if I scroll down over here, this is the full NPI, task list with all the phases that will be created with this for this particular project. I can always this entire phase and task list, right? Well, again, oftentimes we hear from people when they see this, they'll say, well, this doesn't really accurately capture, our process. In our process, we have, another task such and such, or additional phase, or we don't do this other phase over here. The beauty of this is it's fully customizable, right, for any organization, and we can easily go in here and change or remove a phase, or add a phase, or add some tasks, or remove some tasks as needed as well. And if you need to add, an additional task that's not within the phase, mid NPI journey, you can add a subtask like I showed earlier as well. Right? So everything in here about how to add or remove a task is completely customized, or a phase is completely customizable. So I'll back out of here. I'm going to add a new NPI project right now. The last thing I'll show is going to be the task list over here. Right? So in this case, again, like you see, again, it's, we're all fully color coded in terms of, what's, at risk versus what and, already past its due date versus what is, within range versus what's, close to being due. And I can also then filter this by, for example, in this case, by who's assigned to this. And so again, these are all the tasks across all the NPI projects that I have access to. And so if I filter this by a particular user, I can see in this case, which tasks they're assigned to that are, close to being due already, and this means close within the next, 2 or 3 days, I should say. And then this over here is, still has a lot more time left, and these two are already past due. So now if I'm Emily Davis's manager, and she just put in the PTO request for, a couple of days from now, right? Well, I can easily go in here and say, well, hold on, there's still some, outstanding work, one close to being due, the other two already past due, right? And now it's very easy for me to come in here and say, well, let me send a reminder to Emily to say, hey, please complete this before you head out on vacation, right? Right? Send, right? That automatically sends an email, a notification to the user, right, to complete that task, right? And the link, back into the system for her to come complete that, right? And so again, all this means you're using a role-based secure environment to manage your NPI process without having to use, lean on emails and or Excel templates back and forth, where things could get missed or fall through the cracks, right? Right. So all that being said, back in here. So what's the value, right? Ultimately, at the end of it all, right? Value is, first off, you're using a secure role-based collaboration environment, right, to ensure that only the right people with the right roles and permissions get access to the data. You have real-time access and visibility across the entire, project. So anyone with a login to that can see and status the project as is, without having to rely on, well, who has the latest information, and let's send them an email to see if they can give me a status update. There's change in approval tracking, I guess you just saw, right? You have automated notifications and alerts. And again, we can always, rev control, all the documentation and attachments. So to ensure that, again, if you're ever auditing an NPI, postmortem, you can see, okay, well, what specific version of what specific document was attached and or used or sent at what point in time, right? So at this point, I'll pause here, and we'll open the floor up for questions and answers. And so if you have any questions, you can hit the question button in the webinar panel and ask away, and we'll receive them on this end, and answer those. Okay. Yeah, I've seen no additional questions pop in. That's great. Go ahead and advance forward here. This is just to show you guys, show everyone our up and coming webinars and or events, right? Coming up just in the next, month or two. And so if any of these are of interest to you, you can always go to our website, etrage.com, hit the events button and get access to those there. Finally, if our contact information is on the screen, if you have any questions about what you've seen, you can reach out to us. And other thing, lastly, I'll mention over here that we always love to prove our value to any customers or prospects. And so trials of the ETRAGE, products, publisher and reviewer are always available, right? And so for any of that, you can always email sales and we can get you started to try the product out and to prove the value to you as well. So all that being said, thank you so much for attending, and I will see you on a future version of ETRAGE's webinars. Thank you.